evening. So we'll do a call to order. Attendance, Bill Sage back.
Suzanne Dirksen back.
Kurt Osborne in finance.
Trudy P. Press, procurement.
Christine Hart, finance.
Jenny Nolan, budget manager.
Tyson Thornburg, budget and financial analyst.
Kevin Engels, director of finance.
And Dot's the manager's office.
David Vanderpump.
Rita Russell, city council.
Jay Knight, back.
James Surratt back. All right. And nobody online right now. Do we have a motion to approve the February meeting notes?
I'll move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're moving forward. All right, so today is finance, and we're going to talk about the sales and use tax. So, some new stuff.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kevin Engels, director of finance. We have some other finance folks here. We'll introduce ourselves again when we get to their part of the presentation. Go back to the agenda. Yes. So here's our agenda for the evening. We'll touch on our outcome area, which most of what finance does is in the governance outcome. We'll do our finance department overview and 2023 review. We'll briefly touch base on fund balance composition for the general fund. And we will do a preliminary review of the 0.3% sales tax increase that was voted in November of 2022. So governance is what dictates most of what finance does. That is a city government that serves the community by being efficient, effective, accountable, and adaptable. So this is the organizational structure for finance. We have 4 divisions: administration and budget, finance and accounting, tax and licensing, and procurement. The various positions under there. So our vision and mission, to empower city staff, city council, taxpayers, and citizens to make informed decisions by providing accurate information and support. And then our mission is providing business partners and stakeholders with the financial tools and technical support needed to be well-informed leaders and effective decision makers. So we're going to have the division leaders talk a little bit about what each of their divisions do.
I'll start off talking about administration and budget. Jenny Nolan, budget manager. This division, in addition to overseeing the day-to-day operations for the department, we are also financial advisors for our internal staff as well as for council and citizens. So if there are any financial inquiries that are asked of the city, those questions are usually directed to us, and we'll provide a response. Additionally, we will collaborate with the city manager's office, leadership team, city council, in developing transparent and sustainable capital and operating budgets. And then also, as needed, we will also provide long-term financial planning and analysis that are related to operational and capital needs.
I'm Christine Hart, accounting supervisor, and I apologize, I've been losing my voice today. So finance and accounting, we have a lot of different hats that we wear. Treasury and debt management, merchant card, and I'm going out of order, I'm sorry. We establish and adhere, establish and assure adherence to the accounting and financial policies of the city. We produce the annual report and deal with the outside auditors on that. Treasury and debt management. And then we maintain the ERP system, the financial system. I apologize. And currently, we're overseeing the property and casualty portion of risk management. Sorry.
I'll go next. I'm Kurt Osborne, the revenue manager for the city. I have a division of 5 folks, and we manage the city's tax and licensing functions according to mostly Title IV and Title V. We provide support to our local businesses and remote sellers too via phone, email, correspondence. We have a lot of communication with now over 6,000 different businesses that are either licensed or registered in our system. We maintain GovOS, our platform for licensing, and taxpayers can also file and pay tax returns on that platform as well. And over 98% of them choose to do that on our customer-facing online portal. We have 3 sales tax auditors that are busy auditing the books and records of local businesses and remote sellers to determine, did you get it right? Did you pay the amount you owe? If you've collected tax from your customers, did you give it all to us? And maybe you might owe us some use tax too. So that's what they're up to. And we participate, we stay networked with other home rule cities through the Colorado Municipal League and the CGFOA to kind of just stay on the same page with 71 other home rule cities.
And then I'm Trudy Peepgrass. I am the procurement supervisor. Procurement is responsible for basically enforcing all the city's procurement and P-card policies and ensuring that all the purchases, whether it be goods, services, materials, emergencies, follow those city policies and have all the required documentation. So in case there's any audit, we have all that documentation. The procurement functions are summarized within 3 different categories. So solicitation management, this includes requests for proposals, requests for information, statement of qualification, invitations to bid, contract administration and management, as well as purchase order issuance. And then procurement also manages all the P cards as indicated, as well as the Amazon commercial business account. And then do training for internal employees as well as suppliers relating to how to do business with the city.
So here are some of the finance department metrics. One of our annual metrics and our goals is to create an annual comprehensive financial report. That's where all the financial transactions for the city for the prior year come together in one document. That is required by the state and by city charter to have an outside CPA firm audit that. Our goal is also always to have a clean audit opinion on that. That just means that they don't identify any deficiencies in the report.
Real quick, guys, I just got a text from Peter. Would you mind resending him the link? He's having trouble.
I'll try.
Thanks. Sorry.
I apologize. I just realized that during the accounting overview, I forgot the most important thing, which is we are responsible for getting everyone paid, vendors and employees.
Details.
Okay, moving on with the metrics. One other thing that we assist departments with and ensure that we're maintaining as high a credit rating as possible. That comes into play whenever we issue debt, whenever we borrow money for any project that we're going to do. The higher the credit rating you can have, the better terms you're going to get, the lower interest you're going to have to pay.
Does that change regularly, like as an individual credit report?
Not on a regular basis, but we do occasionally ask if we know that operations are going better than they were the last time. We will go out and ask for a new rating. This shows you what some of the ratings can be, and these are our most current ones. So you'll see our GO bonds. They're always highly rated because that's a general obligation of all taxpayers in the city. So there's really no chance of default on those. And then for the individual enterprise funds, sometimes they will go out for a rating as well in order to get better terms on the money that they're borrowing. All of these, the ratings you see there are near the top of the scale. So we have very healthy financial position. And there's some more details on what the scale is for those ratings. So these are we mentioned this earlier a little bit, but two of the metrics we follow and these happen each year, is the Government Finance Officers Association. It issues certificates for achievement in the financial reporting. These are considered the highest level of certificates that a government can give for their financial reporting, and we do that for both the annual financial report and the annual budget report. And we've received those for many years running now.
And then with regards to our 2023 major achievements, as Kevin mentioned, we have received the Government Finance Officers Association awards for the annual financial report as well as the annual budget. And then with regards to our budget, we assisted the city manager's office, department directors, and city council in developing a budget for 2024 that was approved by all council members.
And then in procurement in February, we took on all the contracts as well as the solicitors. Sorry, procurement took on in February, we took on the responsibility of all the contracts. So you can see the volume of contracts that have come through procurement since February of 2023. It totals to 455 contract-related documents, whether it's a contract or renewal, a supplier terms and conditions, or an IGA, whatever. Those run through procurement now. And then in in late June, we were notified that we had a new reconciliation for our P card and had to train 149 card holders over a 5-day period because it was implemented with zero warning to us. We were told it's coming, and they said, okay, you can schedule it. And they said, oh, no, you're done. So we scheduled everybody, got everybody trained within a 5-day period.
And in late 2023 and late 2022 into 2023, Tyson, our budget and financial analyst, surveyed our surrounding jurisdictions and completed a report that was shared with the leadership team, which identified those surrounding jurisdictions' fees and rates that were similar to ours to see, are we comparable? And also to identify, were there some fees or rates that they were off charging their citizens that we weren't? And we provided this information to the leadership team, and they used that in determining whether or not to increase fees in 2024. And I'm assuming they'll continue to use that document again in 2025 as well. What's nice about that document, it provides contact information for the various departments of those jurisdictions. So it helps the department leaders be a little bit more efficient in contacting those jurisdictions.
A few other achievements. We continue to we continue to participate as a city in what's called the sales and use tax system. They need better marketing, don't they? It's the SUT system, and it's a system that remote sellers can use to file with numerous home rule cities. And we are part of that system. We opt into that system in cooperation with the other home rule cities and with the state of Colorado. So that continues to have a real positive revenue impact on the city of Inglewood's sales tax revenue. We finished our part of a pretty comprehensive but revenue neutral, so no TABOR, right? No TABOR issues. Update of the sales and use tax code. Our city attorney is currently reviewing that with us. We are focusing on construction use tax, this special treatment of construction materials in the code and how use tax is supposed to work. And that impacts contractors that work on city projects too, or for a nonprofit or for another government entity in Inglewood. There's a construction use tax issue there that we're trying to get everyone on the same page about. And we just did do quite a few updates and improvements to our public-facing web content, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. So.
In the 2023 funds that our department returned to fund balance consisted of, the total amount was about $206,000. The majority of that return was due to positions that were held vacant throughout the year. We had one position that was vacant the entire year, and then several that were vacant for part of the year. Additionally, we have a placeholder for financial and advisory services as well as year-end contracted accounting services that we did not need to tap into this year. And then we did go over on our capital line items due to replacing 6 outdated desks for ergonomic adjustable standing desks for employees.
So some of the challenges that we face, and some of this goes back to COVID. It's still really difficult to find highly qualified finance staff when we do have vacancies. A lot of what we do is fairly specialized, and just any accountant can't go in and do governmental accounting for us. So there's a lot of competition for candidates. One other thing that's challenging, it's an ongoing thing as well, but we can't always plan too far ahead, is when other departments initiate new systems. They don't think that finance is always involved, but we are always involved at some point. So we're trying to improve communication there between departments.
And then with regards to the general fund balance, there was discussion with City Council back late fall prior to the election that possibly they might have some need of the Budget Advisory Committee to review fund balance or the unrestricted fund balance reserve policy. So I just wanted to kind of just give you just a quick overview of our fund balance composition for the general fund, as well as the unrestricted reserve policy. So we do have some restricted funds as well as unrestricted funds of the fund balance. Reserves are typically restricted. Tabor reserve, you can use those funds in an emergency situation in a given year. However, those funds must be replaced the following year. So typically we say, why bother? These are funds that you wouldn't really be able to tap into other than just a short period of time in the given year, but know that it has to be replenished. We do have some funds remaining in the long-term asset reserve account. This fund was established back in 2007 and accounts for proceeds from the sale of long-term assets as well as the renting of properties out by the McClellan Reservoir Foundation, which is over by C470. And I just forgot the cross street, but Lucent, thank you, Lucent Boulevard, thank you. I couldn't remember. And so those funds over the years have been used to augment our operational as well as our capital requests or funding requests for the general government departments. The unrestricted reserve policy was established initially at 16.7% of operating revenues. But back in 2022, City Council revised the financial policies to adopt a ratcheting and sliding feature of this particular reserve. And I'll go over that next in the next slide. And then the last unrestricted funds is the unassigned fund balance. So between long-term asset reserve, which is committed funds, but we say it's called a reserve, but that can be appropriated by city council, as can the unrestricted reserve amount and the unassigned fund balance. And the reason why we say the unrestricted reserve is because of that sliding scale now. We can go down as low as 12% or as high as 21.4%.
For the long-term asset reserve, does anything get added to that anymore, or is that just kind of dwindling down?
It's dwindling down, yeah.
Are there still rents coming in from eMERF properties though?
Yes, yeah, and that's identified as the component unit income that we show in the general fund. I think we budgeted about 1.9 million for 2024.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then kind of on this, member Ward, if you can hear us. I mean, I remember this coming up, you know, as Jenny was saying, into last year, kind of as we were planning for this year, and to member Russell as well. Is there anything in particular, kind of to rehash that conversation, that BAC can assist or review with this? Or is it just kind of more knowledge base? I mean, it's definitely good knowledge.
Sorry to interrupt. I think the question that has always kind of flummoxed councils is how much in the reserve is enough? And also the question of when we actually draw from the reserve under policy. So what constitutes a significant enough issue to draw from the reserve? My goal personally is to ensure continuity of operation, so there's less disruption during downtimes. And I think that was sort of the impetus for me for the ratcheting and sliding. Is we know the economy moves. We can look at the charts in the past and see that, you know, sometimes year to year, the city will lose up to $2 million in revenue. And that means potentially layoffs or reduction in services. If we have a reserve that's robust enough and can move around, we can stabilize those bumps, those peaks and valleys. But from the committee, I think the best information we can get is more information on what you think an appropriate target is, and when you think it's good to increase the size of government, and when you think it's good to increase the size of the reserve or decrease the size of the reserve.
Thank you.
Could you repeat your question? Your question was a little bit different, right, about the long-term asset reserve?
Well, that was my first question, which I think Jenny answered for me, that we're not overall not adding to it. And then was just kind of going back to when we discussed, you know, end of last year, beginning of this year, like, you know, the ask to the committee on, you know, providing some providing some guidance or anything. So it's just kind of wanting to go back through that to see what we can do to assist as we, you know, look towards the end of your report.
Okay, and I agree with that. So any insight in where, I mean, I come from a different perspective because I was on earlier councils, and the council I was on established the 16.7% reserve. So I think it's good for us to get some input from this committee about that.
Okay. Thank you both. Kind of just highlight that for discussion as we get ready to, if somebody wants to think about digging into that a bit further for the August review. Okay, thanks guys. Go ahead.
This is
Yeah, does
ask a question, Bill.
Sure.
This is Peter from the Budget Advisory Committee. Can someone provide an example or two of some of the long-term assets that have traded both in and out in the last 5 or 10 years? And it may be on the screen, but what is the current balance of that reserve? Thank you.
So I'll go back one slide. Peter, with the current balance is that 94,869, and some of one of the main properties that was sold was property just adjacent to the McClellan Reservoir that was to build the RTD Fast Tracks light rail station. And then we also had sold some golf course property That was the initial sale, when they redeveloped River Point property. And then the ongoing income that we do receive are the tenant rents from that McClellan Reservoir adjacent property that hasn't been sold, but we do rent to several businesses. Like Ralph Champ is out there. I think there are a couple of dealerships, but Kevin might be able to enumerate all of the tenants.
Yeah, several car dealers.
Okay.
We get lease revenue from them. That it's not going into the long-term asset reserve anymore. That was a council decision a few years ago. But it does go into the general fund. There's a school and a hospital.
So the hospital property, that's a long-term lease, correct? Where do the lease payments go to?
They go into the general fund.
Okay.
For all the properties down there.
Okay, thank you.
That's, Jenny mentioned about 1.9 million a year.
Oh, if we just go back just quickly, as a council member, Ward had mentioned that unrestricted reserve is like our rainy day fund. It's supposed to help offset if we have an economic downturn where our operating expenditures are greater than our operating revenues. And again, that ratcheting and sliding, in terms of economic downturn, we can ratchet down to as low as 12% before the city needs to address their expenditure side of the ledger and adjust accordingly, and may slide up to as high as 21.4% during economic prosperity. However, currently our unrestricted reserve is set at 16.7%, so kind of right in the middle of that range.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And to add some more context, council used to backfill the long-term asset reserve when they spent money from it. And when I came on the council about 3 years ago, one of my first priorities was to close that account. I felt like it sort of obfuscated the city's financial position or made it less clear. And it was easier just to have the unassigned fund balance and then that 16.7% unrestricted reserve, and then the Tabor reserve, instead of having like 4 reserve accounts. So that's sort of the history of it, and part of the reason why those funds are now, the rental revenues are now allocated to the general fund as opposed to backfilling the unassigned fund balance, or long-term asset reserve. The other thing about the long-term asset reserve is when we did spend it, we spent it on long-term assets. So the council that created that, I was on a budget advisory committee with former council member Moore, who this was sort of his baby. And they wanted to make sure that there was generational equity. So when they disposed of a city asset, they wanted to ensure that that didn't just get pushed into operations and benefit the current generation, but it got reallocated towards something that was more of a long-term asset, hence the name. So when we invested that money, we invested it in things like Dry Creek or what were then considered to be multi-generational assets. So we didn't just squander the money. We pushed it into long-term assets in order to ensure that it was spent for the purpose that the fund was created for.
Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask what the review process and rate setting process looks like for this, and like how often is that reviewed, and is there like a criteria system used in setting that rate within that range?
It is looked annually during the budget process, but to say if there's a formal criteria in review, I would say no. But Sean or Tim, let me know if I'm speaking incorrectly. But we do ask, should it change? But I mean, city council could. It's up to them to make that decision if they'd like to raise it or lower it.
But we really haven't instituted it. We haven't changed the rate since we instituted the policy either.
And the way we landed on 16.7% is that's 2 months of operating revenue. So if we had zero revenue for 2 months, we could continue to operate off reserves. If we had zero revenue for 2 months, I think we'd be dealing with some pretty catastrophic circumstances, and it wouldn't really matter how much we had in reserve. But that was kind of the point of picking that number.
Now, is it still in our policy that we will have 16.7%? Or did the policy itself change when council changed that?
Policy did change, let me see. And the wording, and I can send this out along with our minutes to the group, but it does specify there's a range.
Okay.
So it's no longer referring to 16.7, but rather the ratcheting and sliding range of 12% to 21.4%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's helpful.
Any other questions before we move on?
So the last piece we wanted to review with you tonight is the 0.3% of sales tax increase that was approved by the voters in November of 2022. There were two ballot issues, both passed. The first one was for street and road maintenance. The first year, which was 2023, was just under 2 million. That will float depending on overall sales tax in years going forward. The second ballot issue was for alternate policing services, and that was just under 1 million for 2023. Now, the ballot language also mentions that this requires a citizen committee to review annually, and the council designated this committee as that citizen committee.
And looking at like the bullet for our June meeting, so there'll be, and if I'm jumping ahead, please just tell me. But the committee will review an audited, already be audited list, right? And then we will review, it says to verify, so probably have to define what that means, but we'll be reviewing that audit list to kind of see if it, I guess if it jives with what we thought it would, I guess, from a citizen perspective. Is that?
Yes,
in
that's
summary.
This is a preliminary review tonight.
Yeah.
Go through the process more than the actual numbers. Yes, in June you'll get a full presentation from the departments, and those will be audited numbers at that time.
Okay, thanks.
So this is just the actual ballot language showing what it's for, and then it will be published on the city's website. Finance will handle that part of it. It will be part of our annual audited report that gets posted on the website, and then you will be in charge of the citizen committee.
Can I ask a question about process with that review? So if we find that there isn't alignment perhaps with what was, outlined in the ballot initiative, is that something that we would include in our annual report to the city? What?
Yes.
I guess the question is, what then?
Yeah, and that's one part of what we want to have a discussion about this evening, is what steps do you want to be able to make if you do see something being done?
To clarify that I don't know the language underneath, but is the concept of the Citizens Advisory Board to be an advisory board? And then the report would be mostly an advisory nature?
Yes. So here are the steps that we've identified, and you can always weigh in and changes if you'd like. It's your process going forward. The first one, we're handling some of that today. We're reviewing the additional reports from the department showing what they've identified as the projects and programs that they've spent the money on. And as we mentioned, steps 2 and 3 will happen in June when they go back and the departments come back and give you a full presentation, and then you'll sign off on that as part of your meeting minutes for that meeting. It's a little hard to see this, but this is a form we created for the departments to count them, track, and identify what they're spending it on. You'll see this again in June when we have the final presentation from the departments. The top section is the public works spending of just under $2 million. They've identified the various zones and streets that they were able to resurface this year that they might not have been able to do if they didn't have this additional sales tax to spend. And down below is the various programs that the police have identified that actually they identified a little bit more than what their revenues came in. They're using up to that $978,000.
So this is saying what they will spend it on, or
This is what they have.
They have
they have spent it on? Okay,
This is all 2023 spending.
okay.
A lot of those line items make sense with respect to alternative policing, and some of them seem like business as usual, so I would love to hear, I guess, a justification as to how some, like a desk officer position, 0.3 FTE, am I reading that correctly? Yeah, like, is that exclusively dedicated to alternative policing? I don't think these questions can be answered, in this meeting, but those are the things that come to my mind.
That's the kind of feedback we want from you this evening so that the departments can
Be prepared to lose this.
Yeah, but all health zone impact, that makes perfect sense.
And then the difference is, what happens, does that roll over? I'm assuming difference, well, no, I guess that's,
No, it would
so,
be,
no, yeah, it'd be negative, right?
it'd be, no, I mean, you look at each year independently of each other.
So their normal budget would cover the other piece of the.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe that's where I'm maybe just being dicks, but how much money we brought in versus how much of that was spent?
So how much money was brought in is that 1.9,
Okay,
and then the 978,000 for policing.
Can we blow that up like 2 clicks, please?
I'm a lot closer. It's hard.
Yeah, or even just to the point where it fills up the page.
So it's approximately $2.9 million in 2023. This is our initial year. And then the actual sales tax for 2024 will vary from this number for next year based on our collections.
Thank you, Tyson.
so we brought in 3.2 million.
For 2.9, yeah.
Okay,
That
So
row
it-
23.
23 will be the total sales tax revenue.
okay, I was looking at 22, sorry.
Line 22 is what the departments have identified that fit into these categories.
Okay. And then 2.9 of that was covered, so to
Okay.
your point, standard budgets cover that other 240 then.
Gotcha.
Okay,
And ideally, that's what we want to see, right?
Yes.
May I ask another question? In the case that there were some revisions, such as, the police desk officer or whatever that then needed to be reallocated, and that freed up potentially like a not insignificant amount of funding. Since this is funding that's already been spent, and since this is an annual dedicated income source, what would happen to those funds that would then be freed up?
So.
Or need to be.
Yeah, so they've identified, specifically with police, they've identified an amount over what the revenue that came in. Yeah, if you advise them that you don't think a desk officer fits into this category, then that's what we need to hear tonight, and we'll go back to them and say, maybe give us a little more information to show how that fits into this category.
Thank you.
And then is it safe, I guess, is it safe to assume that if we hadn't had that 2.9 million, then a big chunk of what's on here would happen, right? I know that's probably a basic question, but I'm just like.
It would have happened because these amounts are included in the budget. And over several years, additional requests of the police department have been required of them without a dedicated funding source. So if we didn't have this additional funding, we probably wouldn't have been able to fund some of the enhancements that we were able, the one-time enhancements that we did include in the 2024 budget without this additional funding, because that funding would have been absorbed by, the alternate policing that's currently already in place. So these aren't necessarily new programs for 2023. It's been ongoing.
Just kind of the allocation of it, right?
Yeah, we just didn't have any really true dedicated funding source
And
for it.
so then that would have came out of the general fund? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's important to note that a couple of things to Jenny's point is that, yes, most of these programs were already in place, but it enhanced them in many cases, number one. And then number two, as Jenny pointed out, it provided financial sustainability, which if they remain in the general fund without a dedicated funding source, they're competing with other programs, and so decisions may have been made to not fund them as well. I think in one of the cases, right, there's an addition of 6 police officers, which the year those were added, I believe there were very few other FTE positions added across the city, really only in very few cases, and only if they were generating revenue. So there's a really good chance that this funding mechanism wasn't put into place, that those 6 positions would not have.
Yeah. Thank you. Between both of you, that's where my head was. I just probably wasn't saying it eloquently.
FTE is full-time employee?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm glad you asked, because I'm having trouble interpreting that center column, and I failed to notice that Public Works use the same format. So like when I read 2 FTE at 75%, 2 full-time equivalents at 75%,
So
what does that really
means
mean?
it was 2 full-time employees that reported that they used 75% of their time and
Okay.
estimated the percentage of, because there's a little explanation at the top there.
Okay,
They estimated that that was how much time they spent on the alternate policing services that were related to homelessness, addiction,
okay,
mental health issues.
okay. Thank you.
But am I right? I think that's what it says.
Yes, that's correct.
So like rows 10 or 11, then that's just 0.25 FTE?
Correct.
One
So-
quarter of one person.
Yeah, 1/4 of that lieutenant position is a full-time FTE, but only a quarter of that position.
So it could also say 1 FTE at 25%?
Sure.
I'll say I don't like this, but I'll adapt.
So I suppose a conclusion that could come out of that is that existing staff were essentially redirected or reallocated toward these additional services.
In many cases.
In many cases.
The lieutenant position, the person was existing, but we actually did not have a lieutenant role. So bringing up some of this money allowed us to create out of a sergeant position, a lieutenant position.
Okay, and I simply ask that because I believe the voters assumed they were getting something additional and not just a reallocation of existing staff resources.
Yeah, so it was an additional position. It was just the person who, which makes sense, of course, because it's moving up the ranks, so to speak, from sergeant to lieutenant. But like the example I used previously of the 6 police officers, those were 6 new positions that were added to the FTE count. I think Sean is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify on I know this isn't the full audit, But just to respond to the statement about, voters thought they were getting something new. We were very clear in all of our materials, in all of our Q&A information, that this was creating a dedicated funding source for our alternate policing programs, and we listed out only existing programs. In fact, I was interviewed by Nathan Hoag for a podcast, and he said, can we re-record that? It sounded like you were just saying we were only funding things that we were already doing. And I said, that's exactly what we're doing, and I won't re-record it. But yeah, so I appreciate the comment, but yeah, we were very clear that we were trying to create a dedicated funding source. Now, what this text does, though, is as that fund, as the revenue from that percent sales tax increases, then we can grow those programs, whereas we cannot put it towards a new officer. So all of the growth from kind of the base year, if you will go towards expansion of those alternate policing programs.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I still have some additional process questions as well. Is it possible to toggle back to that previous slide on the proposed process?
Sorry, give me a second.
No worries, sorry about that.
This one?
Yes.
Right, yeah, and so I want to be clear personally, but I think as a committee, we should be clear about what's expected of us, the timeline for that, and what the platform will be for our feedback or input. And so that's why I had a question about that step 3 there, the BAC's review sign off as part of the June BAC meeting minutes. So I guess I have I'm challenged with that language. It presupposes that it's an automatic sign off, and I don't think that was the intent. And then I guess second of all, is the platform for any feedback that we have the minutes of our meeting? That doesn't seem very effective.
If you go to the form, you can on the very far right-hand side, we have a comments and notes section that the BAC may provide additional feedback.
And so then what? It would be city council that would act on that feedback, or?
And that's, I think in process step number 3, we didn't know if you guys wanted to report back to city council regarding any findings you might have had right after this meeting, after our June meeting. So like in process step number 2, would BAC like to discuss any findings or provide feedback on the process to city council? If yes, when?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that my mind was going the same place. And to kind of add on to that, in the June meeting, so we'll have police and public works here.
Yes.
So then I think what this is saying, and I think this probably works though, is that as a committee, we need to do some homework going into that meeting to have those, like the BAC comments and such. I mean, either we need to look at a special meeting, or we at least at the minimum need to do our homework going into that meeting to be prepared to speak to them. I mean, this definitely helps because we can take a preliminary look and start getting our thoughts together. Because I doubt that it'll change a whole lot between now and June. And then discuss that there, because it's like we're being asked to sign off at the same time, in the same meeting. So it's a very quick, it's an immediate turnaround.
Or we can wait till the June meeting. I mean, this is your call. I mean, this is just a recommendation,
Or are you looking for comments? I guess maybe are you looking for comments coming out of today's meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Process comments.
Yeah,
process comments
yeah.
for this meeting, but comments to the expenditures that are presented by the departments at the June meeting.
Yeah, so we do expect that the reporting will be
somewhat different and that's going to be coming from
Yes,
department
you'll
heads
have
themselves.
a presentation with slides and pictures and all that good stuff.
I guess I'm almost wondering if getting a sign off, and I assume by sign off process wise, we're talking about a vote, to your point. Could someone not, I guess we need to define what sign off means on it, right? I mean, we can provide our feedback and, I guess maybe that's where I'm getting stuck a bit. I mean, there's providing feedback, but then signing off, and if there's distinction on that sign off, what does that really mean? I'm just kind of throwing that out there because that's what's coming to the top of my mind.
And the ballot language only have the word review in it.
Yeah, very open-ended.
The finance department, instead of the terminology sign off, wouldn't it be more of their role for the ballot question, right, is an advisory report, effectively, right, on spending? So it would be more that they would vote as a committee, they would develop a report, review it, and vote on our advisory report that went to council and staff. Is that correct?
Yes. And so that's why I'd asked that question earlier about could it be included as a part of our annual report?
Yeah,
Something that we already do.
That's part of the discussion right tonight is, whether it would be a separate report or whether it would be part of your typical report.
I think it might be separate,
Yeah.
just because it's so early, because your report to council is not till August.
And it feels separate. I'd like to see it be separate just so it doesn't eat into our annual report. So timing is one thing, but maybe if this was delayed, it would be an addendum or something to the annual report, but I feel like it should be separate.
And that might be a question for our council member liaisons, Councilmember Russell and Councilmember Ward. You guys could provide us that feedback at our June or at our May meeting. Would you prefer, their report sooner, or can it be in conjunction with the annual report?
I don't know, I actually am having some questions right now about whether this really is part of your advisory position to council, or is this decision in relation to the citizens and the responsibility to the citizens. I'm seeing this a lot more like I sit on a pension board, and that board isn't responsible to council at all, but they are responsible to the pension holders. That's kind of how I see this. I don't know if that's how Councilmember Ward sees it.
Can we take a look at the ballot language if it's available? I think that will be informative. My personal opinion is that this should be done separately from the Budget Advisory Committee's report. We chose the Budget Advisory Committee to complete the review because we thought that it was, of all our committees, the most uniquely equipped to do such a review. But I really feel like this is a separate function that we've added to your duties as opposed to it being something to include with the annual report.
I agree.
Go ahead, James. You were gonna say
I was
something.
just gonna say, I would compare it then what we do with our capital improvement recommendations. Where
Yeah.
we handle that separately.
And that's, I was kind of going along the same lines. It's not so much a sign off as it is, this is our feedback, right? And we'll, I think, collectively try to work through that feedback. But it's not necessarily, we're not saying, we're not giving a sign off on it, right? We're saying this is as, citizen representation, this is our opinion, just as we do with capital. But it's not like we're signing off on the capital budget, on the capital request either. We're just saying, we think this is good, or we have, so maybe it's that, I don't know what others feel from the committee, if that sign off is kind of, and definition of that is throwing me a bit.
Just another comment on process. It seems to me like having it as a separate function will give both this committee, but also the council members time to actually act on any comments or things, because especially knowing that this is a year-to-year funding, if change needs to be made to the operations, that's gonna take time to implement, that's gonna take time. And also, even if an actual change isn't made, we will also want to give that department some time to maybe better communicate or maybe better justify why they had classified it within this funding in the first place.
Yeah. And my guess is this first year will probably be a lot of that, just as we're trying to understand it, not necessarily questioning, just trying to understand it.
Because trying to fit that into the last, third of the year seems maybe a little hectic.
But I'm wondering about, not that I want to throw another meeting on it, but I'm wondering about our ability to go through all of this in June, or maybe I don't know, maybe we could definitely go into doing our homework. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Well, and Bill, I did have a question about that, because looking at the remaining schedule, we have Public Works coming in April. So with what's currently being discussed, does that mean they'll be here in April and then return in June? And I'm wondering for future years if there's a way to stage our annual schedule in a way that we could have the police department and Public Works incorporate this review as part of their regular presentations, or as a addition or addendum to their presentations.
Yeah, that's smart. Makes sense.
And I know we had the police very early this year, so it would not have worked this year.
I think they gave us a preliminary
Okay.
list, but yeah, they have updated that list for today's meeting.
I'm just suggesting that, Bill, is a possibility to avoid adding additional meetings, and frankly, good use of the department head's time of having to come back here twice in 2 months in the case of Public Works.
Will I'm gonna say the PDF, will that be available maybe on Google so we can work on it independently between meetings, just as we do capital improvement projects in our annual report?
That Excel or that document that we
Yeah.
have? Yep.
Okay.
I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure Tyson knows how.
So I think that's thing one. Speaking for myself, I'm always happy to meet. When I get reluctant to add meetings is putting the burden on city staff, but that is my personal opinion. Do not represent the opinions of the BAC.
And I know, and I'm just thinking, because we'll have this review on June 25th. And then the next month over the next month, we're finalizing our report. And sometimes we're already throwing in an additional meeting, kind of just depending on how it goes.
Right.
I think we did the last 2 years, if I recall. Like an extra July meeting anyway, so I don't really feel like yet another one is. I just don't, I don't think we're going to be able to come into a June meeting, have all the I think we could have people's feedback ready, like you said, work independently, and we could discuss that. But to have an actual report, ready or finalized in the same meeting, I don't think it would come together like that, just realistically.
I agree, Bill.
Oh, Steve, I'm sorry, or Member Ward, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's one other element here that I think might be worthy of discussion, and that is, I think the committee might be able to have a more forthright and frank discussion if the members of senior staff who are normally present in your meetings, along with the council members who are normally present in your meetings, are actually sitting that one out as you're hashing through these things. For me, as a council member, the most important question to be answered by this review is just the basic question of, did this money get spent on the things that we told the voters we were going to spend it on? And to the extent that the committee would like to prioritize other things as fitting in those categories, you can tell us that. But the purpose of the review is did we spend the money the way we told the voters we would spend it? That's how I see it. And I think having senior staff and council out of the room during those discussions ensures that the audit fulfills the purpose that it was designed and intended to fulfill, which is to allow members of the community to discuss whether or not those things fit those categories.
I appreciate that clarity, and I think what I would add to it is if there's any ambiguity as to whether or not the funds were spent, as we said we were going to spend them, how is that going to be audited or recorded or tracked in the future year? Like that 25% of a desk officer. I've got every reason to believe that 25% of the calls that desk officer takes pertains to alternative policing. How's that tracked? And how is it secured by this tax revenue?
I think to that point, and also just as a kind of like thought that I'm having about the process itself, I think the document, the document kind of outlining all of the different spending would be a lot more helpful if like there were an additional column. And I understand that that document's accompanying the presentation, but part of the reason I bring this up is just recognizing some of the time concerns that I think committee members have spoke to today about really making sure that we have time to look through all of this. I think adding another column with like examples for each of those positions of like what that time was actually spent on would be really helpful, and possibly just help us to be a little bit more efficient in being prepared for that presentation. I think that would be helpful. And I think as some committee members have kind of spoken to, if the department is willing to maybe reformat just for consistency, you know, the 0.25, just make it consistently, you know, 1 FTE at a percent or number of FTEs at a percent. I think both of those would go a long way, I think.
I mean, do we, maybe, I think that's good feedback. And then, I mean, maybe, or is this just making this too straightforward that we go in, I mean, some the final report, I'm assuming will be available before June 25th, right? A couple weeks before.
Mhm.
Kind of with the meeting agenda.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, one option would be, you know, I don't want to say it's brute force, but if we weren't going to do any additional, you know, it'd be like, if you have feedback, and maybe kind of when you were talking, I was thinking, you know, maybe the feedback is one, you know, it's like, to Member's point, do I have any concerns that this is not being spent, you know, as we thought it was? And then, you know, and that's kind of like, if you do, that's part of your feedback, right, and why? And the other side might be, and some of this might be more process-ish and just learning how this is. It's like, I don't understand this, or why is it this way? And that's the other part of the feedback. And then maybe not on June 25th, but, you know, if everybody has that, and, you know, we could work with Jenny just as we do with the annual report on getting that all together and compiled, you know, then it's like, that's our review, right? But it, basically, if we're not coming prepared, it's probably not going to get in the final report. But I don't know if that's, and you guys tell me if that's pushing it too fast. You know, and then maybe as we look at next year's schedule, we can look at, okay, well, maybe there's a, you know, like we were just talking, maybe there's a different way to fit some of this in. I don't know. I'm just trying to brainstorm so we're not showing up in June and being like, I don't know what we're going to do.
I actually agree with what Councilmember Ward said. One thing I would, and this is a question, it's kind of written as though the money's already been spent. What would happen if the committee decided that maybe one of the line items did not fit with what the ballot language said? Then what happens?
Well, that's part of the findings that the committee would identify. And hopefully, if there are any questions, you know, after the presentation, that's what you'd be listing in your report or on that form that we're providing you. what are your findings? Say, even after hearing the presentation, collectively, we do not agree that, the desk officer position, just for sake of argument, really fits within the ballot language definition of providing homelessness, mental health, and addiction services. And I think that's another reason why they're identifying additional programs, so that in the event you strike some of those items that we're still covered in terms of, meeting that $979,000. Because again, this too, anecdotally, in the surveys they have taken within their department, this is what they're identifying. It's an estimate, it's not perfect.
Right.
But hopefully, we can refine the process of identifying these programs and the true costs of those programs, so that for 2024, we have better numbers for you and better statistics as well.
Thank you.
Was the entire amount spent?
Yes.
240,000 more, I think.
I mean, what do you all think about the process? I mean, what the review looks like?
So outline it for me from beginning to end.
So I'm thinking, I think it would be nice to start reviewing it now. And if there were any major questions, I think we could bubble that up initially, just be like, or, hey, in prep, departments in prep for June, hey, I had this question, right? And we could individually, we can't all send emails to each other in a group, but we can facilitate through Jenny and Tyson. So that would be kind of a preliminary. Then as we get, say in early June, we get the final copy, we look at it and it's kind of a yay or nay. It's like, do we think this met the ballot language, and the expenditures were aligned? And if not, then why? And outlining that. And again, we can finalize with you of how we do that feedback, but I know we can't send it all as a group to each other. And then if there's additional questions on top of that, like, I just don't understand this one position or this one allocation, that would be the additional kind of feedback, but it's not necessarily saying, I disagree that it doesn't, doesn't necessarily mean I disagree with what's been done here. I just don't get it. And then that might help reduce another meeting, and then we kind of think about it further after we've been through it.
When acting in support of this citizen committee, are we still subject to the same communication rules?
Yes, where there's the community,
the
3 or
open-
more is in.
Yeah,
Okay.
open meetings law.
Yeah. So that's where we can't all
Trying to make
talk.
things easy.
That's it. I know, it's a good question. So, sorry, we go home tonight. We have the opportunity to review on our own. I'm really trying to break this down, like day by day, activity by activity. So by which meeting do we need to have some kind of output?
Well, the June meeting, we need to come
Okay.
in, and I would say, and I don't know if it's possible to get the finalized maybe even a little earlier. I don't know how soon we could get that, but I guess the sooner the better, the finalized version. So that we could then provide that feedback and then be ready.
And right now, this is as final as we have it right now.
Yeah,
So
and that's kind of what I was
if we could get feedback from what we're providing you tonight, that would be great. Then we can be prepared to answer those questions in June.
And we could throw in.
Even prior to June, we
Yeah.
could answer those questions.
But if that's in a Google Doc, I could have all of my thoughts and questions compiled within a week.
Yeah, that's that's
Right.
kind of where I'm going.
Okay.
Is that we probably could do a lot based off of this, what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
And if there are any changes to it, it could be highlighted at that time.
And I'll volunteer, I'm happy to compile everyone's comments. So if James shares something that's similar to what I say, then I'll merge it into a cohesive statement, and then have that back to Jenny.
Yeah.
I do think, like, any clarifications that the departments could provide, on some of these more vague positions and how time is spent would go a long way to kind of just preempting some potential concerns. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I've never worked as a police officer, I don't really have a good grasp of, what this time would be spent in the relation without, better distinction. I think that would be
And understanding the tasks that they're performing.
Yeah.
And Nevin, I really liked your idea of almost an additional column, maybe if not this year, in a future year, of what I would describe as like a budget narrative, almost something that describes a little bit more about what that entails.
And a budget narrative, I think, is almost exactly what I had in mind, yeah.
And that could eliminate some of the back and forth of question, answer.
And we might find this year, with it being new, we have a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And then next year, it's pretty straightforward. Because I imagine, a lot of this is gonna look similar, maybe not the same, but similar year to year, with.
And that's kind of how it was with capital
Yeah, that's what I
improvement
was gonna say,
projects.
is it was,
Yeah.
and this year I think it'll probably even go smoother than this year. But it's, the cool thing is we're doing it, the hard part, and the cool thing is like we're setting a stage for future committees. They may tweak things as well, but we're setting that stage. So this is kind of the harder groundwork of what we want to establish.
So one more process question, also Suzanne, so I understand every step. Would we still have presentations in June from those department heads if we've
Yes.
done a lot of this back and forth? Okay.
Because that's going to be part of that final record.
Okay.
Presentation along with the form. And if there's a separate report outside the form, all that will be part of the record,
Okay.
the committee review.
Well, then I would like to raise again the idea of next year as we schedule, possibly aligning that with the regularly having Public Works and Police perhaps present later in our calendar or in the year in spring.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start providing, so there'll be a Google Doc. We'll start providing feedback.
That would be helpful.
Initially,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Does everyone feel good?
Yeah.
Go back, respect Wying staff, but everyone feel good? Okay, that was good. That was a lot. That was good. About what I expected. Thank you for staff for sitting there as we're thinking through all this. So is that the end of the, okay, all right.
Any other questions?
Oh, I guess I would, and we maybe have to solve this now, but is staff like expecting a final like memo or something in writing?
Well, that's kind of why we put together that form.
Yeah.
So if you'd like something different than that,
No, I mean, I think the form would be good. I mean, we can
we can
talk about it
it's
more,
your choice.
think about it more if we wanted to put together like a formal memo or something, or package like we do for the annual.
Because that sounds like a question for council. Like, how do you want to receive the information? In that form, do you want a 3-page narrative?
Feels kind of like.
I'm not sure a wall of text would be helpful to us. A simple pass fail is probably good. And to the extent that we failed in properly allocating the money, if that's the finding, let us know where. And then also suggestions for where the money could be allocated other than where we sent it. I think that would be most helpful to us. It's just very simple, bulleted, pass-fail kind of report form.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, so we've been talking about the meeting, so we do have our special meeting, with, or our extra meeting, I should say, because we kind of reorganized things last time. So we have Public Works in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after that, we have the joint meeting with EDDA, another, right? No, that's in April, I'm sorry. The 22nd is the council meeting with the budget. So for those of you that haven't been in previous, you can go online. It's cool to be there in person as well. It's usually a long night, but but it's good to attend one way or another, or at least listen to the recording later, because that will help us as we provide our feedback from a capital budget perspective, which is in May. And so we'll be doing similar, reviewing it, providing feedback kind of on the line items. And then EDDA on April 23rd, so back-to-back kind of meetings that month or that week. And that's a new too, that partnership with EDDA to talk about the city center, so another new. So lots coming up. Anything for members' choice?
I just wanted to remind everyone that both Peter and Suzanne's term is up in July. So hopefully they're going to be reapplying. But Suzanne, I'm not sure.
I'm doing math.
Are you term limited? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. It was 2017-ish, but I think I filled a vacancy.
But we'll double check.
Yeah, I'll have to
I'll let you know, but you were the
Yeah,
only
let me
question.
know, Jenny.
What are the
Pardon?
limits?
Let me know when I need to reapply by.
Oh, okay. I'll send you both an email.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
let me know if I'm termed out.
Okay. I hope not.
And I guess just ask if you could provide that information to everybody.
Oh, yes, yeah.
General knowledge.
I'll send it out to the group.
I feel like if you're gonna be term limited, we need to figure out how we change the charter, change the.
I was thinking I'll show you how much I'll try to put into this over the next few months.
Or you may be like, thank goodness. Okay, anything else from members' choice? All right, I think we're right on time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Tight meetings. I say it every time.
I really thought we'd go over today.
Speaking of getting term limits, chair for as long as